Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the place where you can ask all your questions about what's the filibuster, what's a continuing resolution, what's the spending bill business about. Yeah, no one's gonna make fun of you for not knowing things already, or no one's gonna call you stupid or uninformed. There's also a lot of propaganda and misinformation out there running around rampant on these misinformation machines that we're all plugged into 24/7. So this is the show where you can ask for clarification on what's actually going on and what's real. There's not going to be any fighting here. There's not going to be any roasting or debating. I know that there's a lot of really popular shows on social media where Democrats and Republicans yell at each other and call each other names, and there's no actual learning going on or engagement. That is not what this show is. So if that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find any fighting or debating or harassing or bullying here. It is just going to be good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. What's up, Willie? Great to see you. D. Scott, great to see you. And Kim Buckman says, I hate debates. I also hate debates. You're not going to see any of that here. And everybody is welcome, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. I am not going to discriminate against you based on your question. If your question is clearly coming from a right-wing place or a centrist place or whatever, I will treat your question with as much good faith as you type it in. Thank you, Buckman. I appreciate you recognizing that I pronounced it. Do people call it Butchman? I guess it could be Butchman, but I guess there'd be a T in that. Regardless. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be you Republican, Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. Lauji says, will the U.S. turn Iran into today's Lebanon, Syria? Kim Buckman says, or Buchanan. Well, that's just terrible reading, I would say, if somebody's... But you can't pronounce that word, Buchanan. There's an A missing. I don't know. Lauji, I don't know if the U.S. is going to turn Iran into Lebanon or Syria. I think that there probably are very productive ways that we can assist with the protests that are happening there. I just don't trust that Trump and his team are invested or, competent enough to actually make that happen. Fletch Lives Again says, Biden and family was investigated by his DOJ and there was no proof of crime. And no proof of crime was found, right? That is my belief. And also, that is my understanding, I should say. That's not about belief. I should also say that when Republicans took over the House in 2022, that it was that they did like 1,000 investigations into Biden, and not a single one uncovered any wrongdoing whatsoever. D. Scott says, how deep have you dug into the files released? I don't do that. That sounds like a nightmare to me. I do not want to dig through those files. I have instead cultivated a group of people that I trust to go through that information and let me know what's what. Right. Lauji says, I'm afraid U.S. interventionism is just corporate feudalism. I mean, I think that there are a bunch of really bad intentions behind U.S. interventionism. I don't think that it's just corporate feudalism, but I do think that a lot of it is rich people trying to steal resources and get more real estate for building their stupid hotels and shit like that. Fog War Production says, should we try to solve cultural issues with cultural means rather than political ones? I feel like I heard you ask me this question on a previous live stream, Fog War Productions, and I'm still not 100% sure. Sure exactly. Yeah, I'm wrapping my hand around this question, so give me a hot second on that. Cody Bray says, his daughter's diary was pretty crazy. Yeah, but I don't know how substantive that was. Spider Kev says, California. That's not a great comment, Spider Kev, so maybe we can change the tone a little bit. Cody Bray says the documents in his car was also a bit crazy. I don't know what you're referring to, Cody Bray. I think that the government has something to do with cultural issues. I think that they can be part of the solution. I don't think that we should be
relying exclusively on the culture to solve either of those problems. And I don't think that we should be, I don't think we should be looking at the culture just to solve that problem. And I don't think we should just looking for the government to solve that problem. I think that there are things that need to happen in both cases. Like I don't think that it was wrong for the government to make it illegal to fire people for being gay. Like that seems like to be part of addressing a cultural issue of how America views people in the LGBTQ community. But I also think that enabling racists within Homeland Security and ICE is also doing the work of negatively affecting the culture. We have been making movies about racial discrimination and women's equality and income inequality for a really long time. And yeah, I think that there's been some progress on those issues. Like a lot of people credit Will and Grace for developing their philosophy around the LGBT community, but I do think that it's important that the government be involved in that project as well. Cody Bray says pardoning people for future crimes is also crazy. LOL. Yeah, I'm not gonna go to bat for any president pardons Cody Bray, but will you condemn the January 6th pardons and all of the pardons that Donald Trump is selling to the highest bidder right now, Cody Bray? Or are you only upset about the pardons that Democratic presidents do? If we're judging based on a scale of how bad presidential pardons are, Donald Trump's pardons are so much worse than every other president's. It's not even fun. It's not even a close game, All right. Solch Cycle says, bro, I just hopped in because I'm doing that thing called work. Unfortunately, watch your special absolutely killed it. The family enjoyed it. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate that, Solch. I don't know how to pronounce your name, Solch. Do I know you in real life, Solch? But I really appreciate you watching the special, and thank you for the kind words. What's up, Ecuadorian Equo? Smokey Bear says, Donald Trump, the first Protestant Pope. What a weird thing to say. BB Oliver says, bro, for your own sake, don't get involved into politics of any kind. No hate, just saying. No, I am going to get involved in politics. I am going to be involved in politics. I am currently involved in politics. I will continue being involved in politics until politics gets better. But thank you for your concern, I guess. Luigi says, culture roasters often become a means for a political end, I feel. Ooh, do you have a specific example in mind? Luigi, let me know what you think. What's up, Lady Lisa? Great to see you again. Cody Bray says, you were talking about Biden. How long do you think January 6 people should stay in prison for? For life? I think they should stay in prison for however long their sentence was for. Because you had people beating cops within an inch of their life, and Trump just pardoned them. A lot of those people then got rearrested for child sex crimes. And they are trying to make it so that their presidential pardon is going to go against that. There are people who are bribing Trump for pardons, and then they don't have to pay back the people that they frauded. They cheated out of their money. So, Cody, it really does seem like you're making excuses for Trump's pardons and overhyping Biden's pardons. Seems kind of sus to me. Okay, Smokey Bear, stop putting that comment. Evan says, you look like if America had a jihad force. What a weird thing to say. Evan, if you keep on saying shit like that, I'm going to block you. Yug says, hi, how are you? I'm pretty good, Yug. Do you mind if I pronounce your name like that? That's very fun to me. Jay says, LeBron or Michael Jordan? I don't think either of them should run for president. Deffer says, I will not pardon Hunter. Oops, I did. Yeah, do you also have a problem with Republican pardons or just Democrats? All right, Smokey Bear, congratulations. You're out of here. Brian Barbita, great to see you again. Cody Bray says, what was their sentence and what cop almost got beaten to death? Cody Bray, I am not going to walk you through every single January 6th case here on my live stream. If you're really interested in hearing about this, then send me a DM. I'm pretty confident that you won't, though, because I don't think that you give a shit. I think you're just here to spread misinformation. Rich Strip says, what is the most feasible way to get out of the two-party system? You're going to hate the answer, Ritz, but the answer is voting for Democrats, because Democrats are open to ranked choice voting, which is the only way that we can introduce new parties to the political system without there being spoilers. Republicans are trying to make ranked choice voting illegal. I can send you the name of the bill if you want to Google it. So yeah, the best way to get rid of the two-party system is through it. It is supporting the Democratic Party, who will enact ranked choice voting, and then will open up third parties and other independent parties. Ugh, to the political system. All right. Ecuadorian says, I'm preparing to go back home in the coming months because I don't feel safe for America. I'm really sorry that our country is making you feel that way, Ecuadorian. Solsh says, also, I'm more breaks. Oh, DJ, more breaks, please. Yes, all right. Now you're on YouTube, different name. Gotcha. All right, let's get back into these. TikTok comments. Yag says, do you agree with congressional term and age limits? Yes, I do. Ryzen says, MAGA foreign bots and MAGA trolls are out in force with willful ignorance and propaganda. That is 100% accurate. Lawrence Meyer says, look what the Dumpcraft are doing to Virginia right now. Hundreds new taxes, and they gave themselves 150% raise. I don't know about what's going on in Virginia, Lawrence. This is all new information to me. Jacob Piano says, Democrats are pro-abortion, which is genocide. No thanks, I'm good. I completely disagree with that. Jacob, would you like to get into it, or are you just here to spread misinformation? Psychoholic Rambling says, I don't know why everyone hates Trump when he's 40,000 P? I don't know what that means. But if you would like me to tell you why Trump is one of the worst presidents of all time, I'll happily do that. For the Love of Ebb says, those are only proposals in Virginia and they didn't come directly from Abigail Spanberger. Again, I don't know anything about that. For the Love of Ebb says, most of those proposals in Virginia would not be passed. Wardo says, I love Trump and I'm Mexican. All right, that's fine, but that's also not a question. Jacob Piano says, it's not information, it's fact. Unaliving a fetus is immoral. That's not a fact, that's your opinion. Not everybody agrees that a fetus is a life, Jacob Piano. Are you as upset about abortion as you are about the women who have died because of abortion bans, Jacob? Let me know about that. JJ says, Dirk Diggler for president. That's also a block. Congratulations. Block that account. Charlie Creech says, what makes a good president for you? I guess somebody who obeys the laws and somebody who does something about income inequality and believes in climate change. Jacob Cardona says, can't be misinformation if it's an opinion, though. I don't know if I agree with that. Yag says, I'm an independent. I live in Virginia. The new Democratic government has introduced a lot of taxes. I don't know anything about it, Yug. I would love to learn more about that. El Jefe says, what do we think about our president being a PDF? There's nothing definitive in the files, unfortunately, but there's a lot of smoke there. It makes it look like he was intimately involved in all of the shit that Epstein was doing. Ecuadorian asks, do you think Trump will ever be held accountable for anything, or Christie or any of them? I'm so done frustrated. They tried to invade our consulate in Minnesota. No consequences, nothing. When does the line get drawn? What would happen if ICE had succeeded? Genuinely, I'm so tired emotionally and mentally. Ecuadorian, I understand exactly how you feel. And I know how draining it can be to be paying attention to what's going on in American politics and to feel like there's nothing that you can do as an individual. And so I would just recommend that you do things that are good for you and for your emotions. Like go see a movie, go see a band play, go hang out with your friends. Don't talk about or think about politics for a minute. We need to sort of refresh our brains every now and again from all of this catastrophic nonsense. And unfortunately, the answer about will Trump and his, shitty asshole buddies ever be held accountable, the answer is it depends. It depends on if good people like you and me do the work. Yeah, it just depends. I would love to tell you that it's 100% certain, but it really just depends on how much work people like you and me can do, and if we can recruit other people to join us in this fight. Okay, Sterling says, if you hang out with a PDF file for 20 years, chances are, yeah, I agree with that. Woody says, why are Democrats against voter ID? We're against voter ID, Woody, because it is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And Republicans who are behind voter ID have admitted on camera that they are only doing it to win elections. And so if there are problems that you think voter ID can solve, then why don't you compromise with us and make IDs free and easy to get? Because right now it's being used as a voter suppression tool in Democratic districts. Deffer says, bullshit, host. Can you tell me one thing that I said that was inaccurate? Jacob Cardona says, do you think the media works to put Americans against each other? We should all be working together. Completely agree with that. And I do think that the media does do a little bit of that, but I think that really this is the project of the billionaire class and the Republican Party. LMFAO, he just projected what the Dems do. That's not a question, so you are out of here. All right, let's see here. Lady Lisa says voter ID requirements are unconstitutional, in my opinion. Yeah, again, the only problem that I have with them is that IDs cost money and are difficult to get, and Republicans use them as voter suppression techniques. Woody says, dude, Democrats have more billionaires. I'm sick of hearing that stupid crap. That is inaccurate, Woody. Now, would you like to ask a question, or do you want to get booted out of here? Willie Bully says, the biggest cities in the world, and you can't afford an ID. It really seems to me like you guys are not here in good faith. So ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Jacob Cardona says, just generalizing Republicans, we're all human and most of us want what's better for the world. I completely agree with that, Jacob Cardona. And so you will never hear me say a negative word about Republican voters. But Republican power brokers, the talking heads like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, the elected politicians like Trump and J.D. Vance, and the tech billionaires who are backing them like Peter Thiel, like those people are pieces of shit. And I will not shut up about this because it is accurate information that the world needs to hear. People need to know who's fucking them over. And it's the billionaire class and the Republican Party that is working in league with them. Justin says, how would you have a safe election without voter ID? Almost every election has not had voter ID, and almost every election has been safe. Jacob Nahr says, what's the problem with Tucker Carlson? He's a liar. He's a con artist. He's completely full of shit. Do Biagi de la Subauria says, Trump is a criminal and should be in jail. Completely agree with that. Willie Bully says, LMFAO. That's not a question, so you are out of here. Tommy Sly says, do you think Trump could be CIA? I think it's extremely unlikely. Cody Bray says, booting everyone because you're too ignorant to respond is annoying. Why even go live? Congratulations, you are out of here also. Shay May says, Republicans are the biggest welfare recipients ever. That's accurate, but that's not because they're bad people. That's just because their states have draconian tax structures that require the federal government to bail them out time and time again. Savage says, voting should be online using the blockchain. I worry about how secure that would be. Let's see here. Jacob Carduna says, good answer. It's good versus evil in the world right now. Completely agree with that. Jacob Nahr says, those are surface level unsupported claims. What are? Sterling says, also a free federal ID would increase border security because social security numbers aren't securely designed. Yeah, I'm down for that. Free federal ID. That's really easy to get. Let's make it happen, guys. Sonia the boss, great to see you again. Thank you for being here. Ready. Maddie J says, do you think politicians are really eating babies? I don't. There's some might be, but I don't think it's happening like the Pizzagate guy thought it was. Savage says, blockchain is secure enough to transfer billions of dollars, should be good for votes. I mean, people have had their Bitcoin stolen, so, I don't really know how accurate that is. Jacob Nahr says, what you said about Tucker Carlson, saying that Tucker Carlson is baseless, unsupported, whatever evidence you can provide. Yeah, sure. Let's see here. I'm feeling spicy today, so let's go ahead and see. Tucker Carlson lies. Let's see here. All right, I accidentally typed flies. Hold on a second. Carlson lies. All right, we'll go over to PolitiFact and we'll see what's going on there. The Real Life says it depends which state you are in if you show ID to vote. I have always been asked for my ID to vote. I have literally never been asked for my ID to vote. Okay, let's see here. Tucker Carlson, in August 2023, immigration outpaced American births. That was false. Tucker Carlson, the election in Brazil was very clearly a rigged election. That was also false. Tucker Carlson, election voting machines didn't allow people to vote in Maricopa County. That is also false. Tucker Carlson, the United States is about to run out of diesel fuel by the Monday of Thanksgiving week. That turned out to be very false. Tucker Carlson, not a single person in the crowd on January 6th was found to be carrying a firearm, not one. That was false. Tucker Carlson, federal agent directly indicted people on January 6, 2021 and intentionally entrapped American citizens. That is also false. Tucker Carlson, DEA agent Mark Ibrahim was forced from his job and later indicted simply because he was near the Capitol protests on January 6th. That was also false. Do you need me to keep going, my guy? Diegoat says, what's the worst attribute from each political party? I think for the Democrats, it's like purity testing. I think for Republicans, it's still standing trickle-down economics, which we know doesn't work. Zach says, just as a vibe check, what interest did Epstein represent other than his own? I mean, I'm pretty sure that he just represented his own interests, Robert Drake says Donald Trump stole nuclear secrets. That is accurate. Savage says voting should have a national holiday. I agree with that, but let's also have vote by mail and ranked choice voting and early voting and shit like that. Let's see here. Diego did that one. Department of Defense says how much would? I'm not going to answer that one. Lady Lisa says Project 2025 needs to be abolished. Where should we start? That is an excellent question. I don't even know where I would begin to try to undo Citizens United. Alrighty, let's see here. Jacob, did you hear all my? Oh, here he goes. Jacob says, so how does it make sense that you have to show an ID to buy a 6-pack of beer, but not to vote? Because voting is not a controlled substance, you know? Yeah, because liquor stores don't have the voter rolls that says how old you are, Jacob Nar. And I think it's really interesting that you were like, what lies that Tucker Carlson is told? And then I read you a whole list of lies, and then you just moved on to a different topic. Awfully sus, in my opinion. Evan says, what do you think about Nick Fuentes? I think here's the thing. I'm not going to describe Nick Fuentes in any words that he has not used to describe himself. Nick Fuentes says that he is a misogynist and that he is an anti-Semite and that he is a racist. Nick Fuentes says that he is a fascist and that he is a neo-Nazi. And I think that those are bad qualities, so I think he's a real piece of shit. Nick says, how do you think the midterms will go? No human being in the world can tell you how that's going to go. You know, political predictions are worthless. I will just tell you this. What do you want the outcome of the midterms to be? All right, go do the work. Go try to make that happen. You know, I want Democrats to sweep. Oh, hey, I just got reported for harassment and bullying, which is really strange. I would love to know exactly what I said that constitutes harassment and bullying. Can anybody say a single fucking thing that I said that was harassment and bullying? Anybody? Pretty sure that was you, Jacob, because I called you out for, for not giving a shit about facts, right? Pretty interesting. Hey, it's Sophia, my conservative friend from Alabama. Did you hear that I got reported for harassment and bullying again? Irene Vedusa says, it was me. Well, why did you report me for harassment and bullying then, Irene? Jacob Cardona says, do you think democracy is becoming outdated? It's just a popularity contest that lies to voters. I don't think so. I think that when you have representative democracy, what you have is electing representatives. And I think that you have a little bit of wiggle room there, whereas if Americans were voting for every individual issue, it would, I think, make things a little easier to muddle the waters. This is not a very well thought out thought that I'm having right now, if I'm being honest. Short version, I don't think democracy is outdated. I just think we need to do some reforms so that it can't be hacked by the billionaire class. Alrighty. Sophia says, opinion on Tucker Carlson being one of the few Republicans to speak out against Israel. Stop the clock is right twice a day, as they say. Irene says he's mad. Well, you are blocked. Alrighty, let's get back over to some of these Twitch and YouTube comments. Okay. DJ Moore Brinkley says, someone who follows the Constitution of the United States would be a great place to start. That has to have been about what would be a great president. Ecuadorian says, is there some way blue states could start doing the presidential election cycle instead of coming to polls? We could just start doing Google Doc voting. I think it would be really cool for somebody to develop sort of like a backup voting system so that we can double check the voter, what the government tells us who won the election. I don't know enough about the technology to figure out what would be unhackable and what would be safe, but I don't know. Elections are all run by states anyways, so there is sort of limited chicanery that the Trump administration would be able to do legally. There's a bunch of other shit that they are planning on doing that I think is really concerning, but yeah. Sorry. Hey, Jacob Nar says, didn't report you for harassment, but if you block anybody who says anything remotely mean, I don't know what the rest of your sentence was supposed to be. And I'm not blocking people for saying things that are mean. I'm blocking people for spamming. Melissa says, I love your t-shirt. Thank you. D. Scott says, do not take the voting power away from the states. Completely agree with that. Lady Lisa says, do you think funding for Social Security will run out soon? I don't know. If it does, it's because we're not taxing the billionaire class. Savage says, workers should own the means of production. Completely agree with that. Shane A says, loopholes equal Republicans, full-blown socialism. Not really sure what that means. Jacob already did that one. All right. Oh. All right, so here's the thing, TikTok. Because I got reported, I have to stop and restart because right now we are dead in the water. So come right back, everybody who's watching on TikTok. So sorry. Hold on a second. Jacob Piano says, billionaires typically aren't cash rich. How would we tax them on their net worth? There are a lot of ideas that are coming out of this from people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And so I would just ask those people how would we do it. But yeah, taxing their net worth could be a thing. Mansion taxes, multiple residence taxes, things like that. Fogwar Production says we should use hefty blue and red painted stones to vote. I like that one. Jacob Piano says those aren't the ones I'd ask. Why not? Do you not think that they are not people who you can trust or people with substance? Jacob Piano. And Dave says, sounds like TikToks are easy to get reported. Yeah, and used to be able to, what do you call it? Used to be able to appeal those decisions, but they took that button away. Interestingly, I don't know. Jacob Piano says, super libs, too far to the left. You know, Jacob, I would love to chat with you about that, but again, I have to stop and restart on TikTok. So everybody who's watching on TikTok, please come back. I want to answer your question, Jacob Piano. I want to answer your question. Juan Wick, love that name, by the way. So yeah, come right back, everybody. I gotta pop out and pop right back in. All right, what's up? Happy Tuesday to you too, Average Joe. Boy, oh boy. All right, John Abbott says the entire Fox News roster pretty much famously spent an entire year knowingly and intentionally lying about the 2020 election. They had to pay out almost $1 billion to Dominion because of it. It's why Tucker got fired. Accurate as hell. All right, welcome to the live stream, everybody. I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. I do not care. There's no fighting here. There's no roasting. There's no debating. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Average Joe says, do you agree or disagree? 1, seize the funds of every billionaire and freeze all offshore accounts until they're taxed at 50% minimum. 2, imprison every billionaire until they prove that they are not creepy pedophiles. And 3, try every member of government that justified or lied about January 6th for treason and adhere to guilty verdict punishments. Billionaires, asset liquidations. Oh, that's interesting. Clockwork Orange says, God, people bore me lately. What's up? I hope that's not me also. I hope I'm not boring you. John Abbott says, if they can take loans against a non-liquid asset, we should be able to tax them on those assets. If they're as smart as the right claims they are, they can figure out how to pay the tax bill. Completely agree with that. Dave says, 80s Democrats seemed more center-left than now. 80s Democrats seemed more center-left than now. Are you saying that today's Democrats are too far to the left? Dave, let me know about that. Daniel says, I'm curious, why are Democrats against voter ID requirements? Seems fishy. So Daniel, let me be 100% clear about this. There is no problem that voter ID solves, and Republicans use voter ID in order to suppress Democratic votes. Would you like me to go into more details on that, Daniel? Let me know. Dave says Democrats are too far to the left now. I disagree with that, Dave. But what is it? What issue or platform or policy do you think that Democratic politicians are trying to pass that you think is too far to the left? Gabriel says, thoughts on the files. A lot of really shitty people in there. There's a lot of unsubstantiated claims. So I think we need to be, the devil's in the details. So let's not, not everybody who Not everybody who's in the files did PDF shit, but a lot of people who were in the files did some sketchy shit. Daniel says, yes, please. Open to hearing your stance. Absolutely. Okay, so there is no widespread voter fraud that would necessitate the need for voter ID. There are not illegal immigrants who are flooding the polls with fake votes so that Democrats win elections. That's just not a thing that happens. They have done studies on this. They have looked for voter fraud. They found something like 5 cases over 20 years, so it's just not a thing. What they do, though, is they close down DMVs in Democratic neighborhoods so that it makes it really hard for Democrats to get IDs. It disenfranchises poor people who can't afford to get an ID. And we have on tape Republican politicians saying that voter ID is going to win them elections. Not because it's going to stop voter fraud, but because it's going to keep people from voting who would normally vote against them. If you would like me to send you any of that information, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to do it. Let me know what you think about any of that. What's up, Jacob Piano? Juan Wicks, excellent name, by the way, says, what is ICE doing wrong? ICE is violating people's civil rights and their human rights and their due process rights. They have murdered people with zero oversight or accountability. Brian Smith says, why no ID then? Seriously, why? Because IDs are sometimes too expensive or difficult to get for people. San the Baller says, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Kamala Harris. Jacob Piano, yo, great to see you again. Michael Harmon says, that's bullshit. What is? D. Scott says, also, you need to provide docs to register, so you shouldn't need it at the polls. That is 100% accurate. And let's see here. Brian Smith says, 91% of Americans have driver's licenses. What are you talking about? That doesn't refute any of the things that I just said, Brian Smith. So I don't really understand why do you think what I said is negated by what you just said? All right, Muzz King, Lindsay, D. Scott, Lady Lisa, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Alrighty. Jacob Piano says, I'm all for taxing billionaires, but taxing their next net worth will never, ever work. It's not a realized gain. Did you hear what... listen to this, Jacob Piano. Let me know what you think about this. This is from one of my watchers over on YouTube. If they can take loans against a non-liquid asset, we should be able to tax them on those assets. If they're as smart as the right claims they are, they can figure out how to pay the tax bill. Let me know what you think about that. Alrighty, let's put a new quest up here. Fantastic. All right, Daniel says, I will DM you, need to read up more. I love to hear that, Daniel. Degree says, how have Zionists ruined the U.S.? I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that one. Juan Wick says, thoughts on Newsom? Newsom's fine. He's okay. He's not the devil. He's not perfect. I love his messaging strategy during the Trump administration. I think that he is rallying California's resources to fight Trump relatively well. He's definitely not my first choice for president in 2028, but if it was him versus any Republican politician, I would vote for him without even a second thought. D. Scott, Muzzking, Kendo, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Sophia says, opinion on how strict climate change laws could significantly harm farm owners. Sophia, I think that when you do massive changes that some people get lost in the cracks, and I do think that it is the government's responsibility to try to catch and help those people as best as they can. I believe that unchecked climate change is going to hurt those farmers way more than switching over to climate-friendly policies. Brian Smith says, you said ID is too expensive, but we already have them. Well, you said 91%, Daniel. So what about the last 9%? Do you think that those people, maybe it's too hard for them to get an ID because they're working 5 jobs? Maybe they can't afford the $80 to get an ID because they already can't pay the electric bill, or they're drowning in medical debts or student loan debts. There is this thing that I see from people sometimes where they cannot fathom how difficult life is for other people in America. Like the idea that it would be too hard to get a driver's license or an ID is unfathomable to them. The idea that they can't drive to another state to get, medical care is unfathomable to them. And so I would just say, there but for the grace of God go I. Can you have a little bit of imagination in figuring, maybe go watch a movie about a poor person and see, like, if maybe that vibes with you. Maybe it's like, I can't believe people have to live like this kind of a thing. All right, let's see here. Clockwork Orange says loans. I want to get into this Clockwork guy. It says the non-logical conclusions that comes with religion and politics bore me. I mean, I'm all about logic, my guy. So let's talk about it. Clockwork Orange says loans and taxes sound tiny hat-ish. Clockwork Orange, that's some anti-Semitism shit, so I'm going to ask you to undo that shit and don't do it again, or I will have to block you. Alrighty, let's see here. Brian Barbita says, so you believe in student loan forgiveness? You know, I do. I know that some people view that as unfair because they had to pay their student loans, but to me, if one group suffers, then another group shouldn't have to suffer if we don't have to make them suffer. If it is a net positive for the country, then yeah, 100%. If you would make more money if the government gave somebody else a free house, would you oppose it just because you had to pay for your house? Beaverino says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, 100%. Dave says 1750 for a real ID, or so says the interweb. Okay, Dave, well, some people can't afford that. Brian Barbita says, as you know, I'm in college. You have a choice of what school you go to and also can receive academic scholarships. Yes, that is accurate, Barbita, but not everybody qualifies for academic scholarships, and not everybody can afford to spend time learning. You know, I went to school with people who had to work jobs while they were studying, and if you think that that did not affect their ability to get good grades, you know, then I would love to send you some information on that. Wooden Hammer says, what's funny is how many times Israel was mentioned in the Epstein files. Yeah, I did hear that there were some pretty intimate connections between people like Netanyahu and, was it Ben-Gvir? I don't really remember. John D says, why is the GOP Congress still ignoring the lies, corruption, and criminality of Trump? They are either too afraid of Trump to do anything about it, or they are complicit and they are down with Trump's project. Use a whole bunch of numbers. Don't throw shade at other people in the comments, or I will block you. Dave says, billions in fraud proves the government could excuse loans if they wanted to. Yeah, I generally pretty agree with that. Percival says, I worked 4 jobs to get through college with no student debt. Hectic 4 years. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that, Percival. Brian Barbita says, I see your reasoning. I just feel there are many options like trade or junior college. Yeah, Brian Barbita, there are avenues. But what I would like to propose to you, and I would love to DM you about this if you want more specific information on it, is that even people that go through those trade programs are slowly being squeezed into poverty. Even people who do everything the right way and take advantage of all the programs that are there to try to help them, they are being squeezed into poverty. And so, you know, I don't think it's enough. I don't think we're doing enough for the poor. We're doing too much for the rich and not enough for the poor and the working class, in my opinion. If there are people out there who are dying because they can't afford insulin, if there are people out there who can't afford homes, if there are people out there who are worried about putting food on the table or sending their kids to a good school, while billionaires are flying around on golden private jets and have mega mansions and mega yachts up the wazoo, then we are not doing enough for the poor and we are doing too much for the rich. Brian B says, hey, Jared, what do you think about Trump's national voting? It is his attempt to take over elections so that he can lie, cheat, and steal his way into electoral victory. Error says they earned it. Work harder. I'm just going to go ahead and block you right now because I don't believe that somebody with spelling like that is here in good faith. Juan Wick, again, dope name. Do you think cartels are terrorists? I don't know if the definition of a terrorist matches the activities of the cartel. I don't think that the cartel are good people, but I think that calling them terrorists is a little bit of a stretch. Chris 10 says, U.S. has the largest wealth inequality gap of all developed countries. Is that true? That makes sense for me, but I didn't know if that was true. OB Dan says, Dem here, I like Donald Trump's idea to pay for college at birth with investment money. Thoughts? I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I just think that it is one more mechanism by which Trump is going to take your money and put it into his pocket. I just don't trust the guy. I don't trust him to build a ballroom or the Kennedy Center or an arch without either putting taxpayer dollars in his pockets or his buddies' pockets. I don't trust him to have a cryptocurrency. I don't trust him to be able to have the pardon power because we are watching him take bribes in real time. Oh, right. Awesome Sauce says, wasn't it Locke that said it is our duty to revolt against a tyrannical system? I don't know, but that makes sense to me. Locke Franklin says, hey, friend, how's this going? Pretty good. How are you doing? User a bunch number says, how is that even shade if it's a fact, like, actually? I don't give a shit. User a whole bunch of numbers. Don't throw shade at people in my chat. Johnny Sloan says he's not a Democrat. Who's not a Democrat? Dave says ending the interest on student loans would be a middle ground. I think, yeah, it seems pretty cool to me. Just Call Me Bob says lobbying is just legal bribery. No arguments here. Beaverino says Tree of Liberty must be watered, not with the blood of tyrants, Beaverino. I do not condone any kind of violence whatsoever, be it against the wealthy or tyrants. Social Democracy says Sweden has the highest wealth inequality than the USA, I believe, and the Netherlands. I find that hard to believe, Social Democracy 14, but again, I don't have these stats on the top of my fingers. I'm just repeating what somebody in my chat said. Sophia says, how do you think we should handle the rise in cost of living? Excellent question, Sophia. So let's figure out what is causing the rising costs of living. So number one, we have issues with resources. Because of Trump's stupid trade war, we don't have the availability for things that we need to make and do all the things that we want, which is creating scarcity, which is raising the prices of things. But a bigger issue is hypermonopolization. The fact of the matter is that the Republican Party has had a laissez-faire attitude towards hyper conglomerization, and that has completely eliminated market competition. And so if you decide to boycott one company, it doesn't really matter because that company was owned by a parent company that owns 5 other companies, and so they're going to get your money either way. If one company decides to raise prices, that company is also owned by the same hyper conglomerate who's going to raise prices for all the other companies. Exactly. It happens in lockstep. So I think we need to do something about, access to resources. I think we need to break up these monopolies. And I think we need to tax the rich because part of the reason why, that is a longer walk than I think I have the energy for right now, but we'll get there, Sophia. We'll get there. I promise you. Don't forget to ask me how taxing the rich would help with inflation. Beaverino says, Coke and Pepsi majority share owned by the same corporations like Illusion of Choice. I believe that that's accurate. Yes. Lursey says, do bombings, extortion, kidnapping not qualify as terrorism? The Mexican cartels do all three. I'm not really an expert on the definition of terrorists. So, yeah, potentially. But again, I don't know. It seems to me like the Trump administration is labeling the cartels as terrorists in order to do things that are like legally dubious. So I'm a little skeptical of that. But, I don't know, man. Again, I'm not really an expert on what makes somebody a terrorist or what the cartels are doing in the places that they are operating. Chad says, do you believe as I do that we are headed for a civil war? I do not believe that we are headed for a civil war. Israel Franco says, after the midterms, will new Democratic leadership be elected? I believe that is when the elections happen, but elections can happen whenever they are called for. So if the Democrats in the Senate decided they didn't like Chuck Schumer anymore, they could have the vote tomorrow. Well, they would just need enough Democrats to actually do it. Brian Smith says, do you think the government is too big? I don't think the government is too big or too small. I think that it's too big in certain ways, and I think it's too small in other ways. Let's see here. Fog of War Production says, for a time, Pepsi had the 6th largest navy in the world. Is that a bit? It's a very funny joke. Or it is a weird fact of history, Fog of War. I want to know which one it is. Fixer Mike says, Jarrett, I'm amazed I haven't gotten a stress headache at all in the past 13 months. How about you? I mean, I've definitely flipped the fuck out a couple of times. Evan says, do you support Netanyahu? No, he's a war criminal. Locke Franklin says, do you believe our system can still work? I think we need a complete restructure. I think it can. I do think that it needs to be amended in certain ways. If one thing that the Republican Party and Trump have given us is a list of where our institutions and laws need to be revised so that they can't get away with this shit going forward. Real Bendis says, did you see Kristi Noem getting stumped about constitutional law in hearings? I didn't, but that doesn't surprise me, not even a little bit. Percival says, I really hope Schumer is ousted. He's demonstrated that he's not up for the fight. I completely agree with that, Percival. And what I have read in reporting is that Chuck Schumer is planning on retiring at the end of his current term, but that he wants to retire as majority leader in the Senate. I don't think that we should let him do that. I think that we should fight him on this. And I know that he would love to retire as majority leader, but I'm sorry, you're just not doing the job good enough. You know, there are a lot of pitchers who wish they could do the entire game, but he's lost his fastball, so we got to get him out of there. Sophia says, even if the cost of living doesn't decrease, wouldn't lower taxes help balance it out? Yeah. I suppose an argument could be made for that, Sophia. My concern, though, is I don't want to lower taxes on the rich. And I don't think that lowering taxes on the rich is going to do anything to help with the cost of living. Yeah, I don't know why this question is kind of stumping me today. Because like I'm putting the pieces together in my brain and I'm just like looking for all the pitfalls and stuff like that. Yeah, I know that on a previous show I've connected these dots, so I don't know why it's you know, it's escaping me today. Yeah, I think that if a billionaire gets their taxes cut, then they are able to buy 1 million houses, and that decreases the supply of houses, which increases the cost of housing for everybody. That's the sort of like short version, I would say, of the math. Catgirl says, wasn't Trump going to go to jail last year? He was, but then the American people decided to make him president, and now he is not going to go to jail. Emily in the City says, why do low and middle class fight so hard for billionaire tax breaks? It's hilarious and ignorant. Misinformation and propaganda. Ali Zader says, what's your opinion on Hezbollah? I believe that they're a terrorist organization, right? I don't know too much about them, but I remember reading that they did things that were bad. Awesome Sauce says, Trump said he wanted to increase housing prices for people who owned homes, not home singular. Yeah, 100%. User a whole bunch of numbers. What are your thoughts on Alabama ranking in the bottom 10 nationwide for education? You know, I think that that's a completely fine question to ask Sophia. User a whole bunch of numbers, but if she doesn't answer it, you have to stop asking. Catgirl says, Trump for king. Who are you talking to, Catgirl? Are you saying that I'm embarrassing myself? Are you really saying that you want Trump to be king? Because when you asked, wasn't Trump going to jail last year, I figured you are not this kind of person. Okay, let's see here. Catgirl says, oh, you definitely are. Oy, 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 oy. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what's embarrassing. What's embarrassing is when some dude who's just doing a live stream about politics has sex with somebody's mom. I would really hate to be the person whose child of that mom I was. All right. Ali Zader says, how can they be a terror organization if they led the fight on ISIS in 2014? I'm not an expert in Hezbollah, so I can't answer you that question for you, Ali. Joe Fregia says, do you favor Trump? No, I do not. T-Volk says, what are your thoughts on militarization in the U.S.? And do you think we will see armed resistance? I don't think we're going to see armed resistance because I don't think that armed civilians can take on the American military. I think it's too powerful. I am glad that people are arming themselves, though, because there are steps between a full military takeover of America and where we are now. And I believe that when a bunch of people with AR-15s are at an ICE protest, then that incentivizes ICE to not just straight up fucking murder people in the street. Not very decelerationist of me, but, you know, I'm glad for their safety in that moment. Ready. There's way too much going on over on the Twitch, guys. I apologize if I am ignoring you, but it seems like you guys have like a whole debate going on over there. So, let's see here. John Abbott says, Pepsi did have the 6th strongest Navy for a bit as part of a deal to sell their product in the USSR. They bought 17 subs and 3 or 4 ships in the USSR, which they then sold to Norway for scrap metal. That is fascinating. Thank you for letting me know about that, both John Abbott and Fog of War Productions. Fog of War Productions says Jarrett carries the unenviable position of having to solve the birth rate by himself. Yeah, man, it's all your fertile moms that's doing it. Jacob Nar says, are you inciting violence? No, I am not. I condemn all violence, regardless of which side it comes from. I condemn violence in the strongest possible language. You will never hear me advocating for violence, not even a little bit. Best Champ Eva says, would love your thoughts on if Trump will have any real repercussions for his Epstein activities. The only way that Trump and his people are going to face accountability for the crimes that they have done is if we put enough Democrats in the government to actually make that happen. The reason why Trump and his friends have not felt any accountability going forward in the past is because there were too many Republicans in Congress and in the Supreme Court and in the Department of Justice. So do the work of electing more Democrats, of replacing every elected Republican with a Democrat, and you will see accountability for Trump and his acolytes. Percival says, Jared is against violence and 100% for love of your mom's. Accurate. Beaverino says, thoughts on Trump saying he would nationalize elections in certain states. It is his attempt to steal elections. He wants to control counting the votes so that he can lie about how many votes him and his Republican buddies have gotten. Brian Barbita said, should the voting age be 18? I'm open to arguments that it should be lower, but I'm not dogmatic about it either way. I am not like, lower the voting age. And I'm also not like, keep the voting age where it is. I'm open to arguments either way. That is not an issue that I vote on. Jacob Nar says, the guy wants a one-party system. You know, Jacob Nar, that is an inaccurate description of what it would look like if there were no Republicans in government. Because the Democratic Party is a rainbow coalition. It has people like Joe Manchin, and it has people like Elizabeth Warren. It has people like Chuck Schumer, and it has people like Bernie Sanders in it. And so that is not a unified government. It has the African American caucus and the LGBTQ caucus and the Jewish American caucus and the Mexican American caucus and the Asian American caucus. That is not a one-party government. Jacob Nar says, that is the worst answer I've ever heard. Okay, well, you don't have to be here. T-Vlock says, what do you think the biggest opportunity for the U.S. to improve in the next 5 years is? I probably tax the rich, I would say. Moore says, who's your favorite news reporter? I'm a Chris Hayes guy. I like Chris Hayes and I like Rachel Maddow. They're pretty smart. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, Sophia answered by basically saying she isn't sure the reasons why Alabama ranks low in that. Okay, user, a whole bunch of numbers. Do you see the tone that you are taking here? Like, she answered the question, but then you had to project that answer to everybody as though there's some indictment of her. Like, you know, I see this happening. I see people trying to go after her, and I don't like it. You know, if people did this to my other viewers, then I would protect them also. But for some reason, people only attack Sophia. So I have to go protect her. Alrighty. I'd Trouble says this must be satire. It is not. Jacob Nauer says Rachel Maddow is more accurate than Tucker Carlson. That's hilarious. I mean, she is more accurate than Tucker Carlson, Jacob Nauer. And you have to go back to asking questions or I'm going to boot you, Jacob, because I'm tired of your nonsense. Alrighty. Let's see here. Social Democracy says the idea of a corporate state aimed at ensuring class collaboration is a fine idea. I just disagree with the totalitarian nature of fascist corporatism. In America, we briefly had a liberal democratic version of this under the New Deal. Are you suggesting that America after the New Deal was fascist corporatism, social democracy? Because I would argue against that, even though I'm not a history major. I find that to be pretty hard to swallow. Ambien John says, do you think a blue election can fix the mess we find ourselves in? I think it has to be a lot of different things, Ambien. I don't think that Democrats taking back the House and the Senate by itself is going to do everything. And I don't think that having the Senate and the House and the presidency is going to do anything, because we would still have a Supreme Court that is hostile to the rule of law and accountable democracy and shit like that. I think that it's going to take that plus a lot of us doing the work. People like you and me doing the work in order for there to really be substantive positive change. But at this point, I would just be happy if we could stop the bleeding. I would be happy if we could at least stop the current corruption and chaos and violence and instability that Trump is causing. That I would view that as a win. But there is a lot more work to be done after that. Let's see here. I'd Ebe Trouble says, what bleeding? I mean, the massive corruption, the violence, the ignoring of people's human and civil rights, the elimination of due process, the attempt to steal elections, bribery, unprecedented bribery and corruption. The president has a crypto coin. He is selling pardons. Like, that's the bleeding I'm talking about. T-Vlog says, how do we get out of this without violent response from the left? Just don't do violence. That's all. If you look at a political scientist named Erica Chenoweth, she has argued that nonviolent resistance movements are way more productive than violent resistance movements. So just don't do violence, be part of the resistance movement, do the nonviolent work, and we can get out of this. Ida Trouble says, what pardons? You mean like Biden's auto pen pardons? This is gonna blow your fucking mind, but I don't think that you were here in good faith. If you only have a problem with Biden's pardons and not Trump's pardons, I think you might just be here to push your narrative. Prove me wrong. I'd prove me wrong. Jacob Nair says, this guy says use nonviolence, then says bring an AR-15 to a protest. Is that illegal, Jacob Nair? Is that violent, just bringing a gun to a protest? I'm asking you, Jacob Nair, what is violence? Is bringing a gun to a protest violence? How do you feel about Kyle Rittenhouse actually using that gun on people? Was that violence? I'm really losing my patience today. All right, I need to take things down a little bit. Take things down a little bit. Catgut says, I just landed on Goyim side of TikTok. Is this why they eat kosher? Catguts. I don't know if that comment is anti-Semitism or weirdly, like, hyperbolically pro-Jewish. So I'm just going to ask you to take it down a notch, whatever you're doing. Scrolling down to the bottom, says, Jacob Nair says, Kyle Rittenhouse protected a business because the police were unable to. He brought a gun to a protest, Jacob Nair. That was the thing that you had a problem with. Tell you what, Jacob Nair, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of you. You have proven that you are completely full of shit. So TikTok is not letting me block you for some reason. Wow. We are seeing it happen in real time, guys. He didn't bring a gun to a protest. His business was the site of a protest. No, that is wildly inaccurate. Can one of my mods block Jacob Nair, please? All right, fantastic. It happens. Oh, right. Yeah, for some reason my thing here was Futzen. Ooh, that really got me. Oh, hey, I got reported for harassment and bullying again. Unfucking believable, guys. Yeah, I gotta be honest. The trolls have got me today, everybody. Best Champ Eva says, I don't get why Republicans don't care that their president is a PDF. Can they process logic? Some people just don't care. They do not care. They just want their side to win. Let's see here. LeBron James says, MAGA still supports and worships Trump's even after the E-files. Some have and some have not. Let's see here. Thank you, Average Joe. I appreciate that. The Known Dark Senate says, what's up? I meant to say, what's up back? The Known Dark Senate. Social Democracy says, no, I'm saying under the New Deal, during the New Deal, America had a liberal democratic version of fascist-style corporatism with the NRA or National Recovery Administration. That seems a little overhyped to me, Social Democracy, considering that that was the most progressive presidential administration and most progressive worker-focused legislation potentially in American history. I find that to be a little hyperbolic. And inaccurate, you know? Good to see you as well, the Known Dark Senate. John Abbott says, basically every picture of the anti-mask, anti-lockdown protests from 2020 to 2021 is filled with people open carrying. How interesting. Joe Fregia says the country is great and Trump is a great president. I am not going to bother with you, so see you later. Israel Franco says, do the Supreme Court judges retire this year? Supreme Court judges have lifetime tenure, so they can retire whenever the fuck they want. I believe that Alito and Thomas want to retire, but they also want to stay there and do as much damage and get as much money and bribes as they possibly can. So they're going to wait until they believe they can be replaced by other shitty Republicans. You know what? Sorry, I need to roll that back a little bit. I have no idea why Thomas and Alito have not retired yet. I think that they believe that the Senate is going to stay in Republican hands, and so they are potentially going to stay until the end of Trump's presidency. Max Schmidt says, wild take. What's wild? User a bunch of numbers says, how can we get rid of them? Can we? We can impeach them, which would require Democrats having a massive majority in the Senate. Or we can add seats to it, which would basically like nullify their votes. We can change the law so that judges don't have lifetime tenure anymore and force them into retirement after a certain number of years. Shit like that. Sophia says, do you think the government is too involved in the economy? I don't know what too involved would mean. I think that in some ways they're too involved, and in certain ways they're not involved enough. Where an apartment building in Miami, Florida can collapse because it was not properly regulated is not enough. Where it was too difficult to make high-speed rail in California because of burdensome regulations and regulatory capture, I think that's too much. Beaverino says, do antitrust laws have any teeth anymore? They do. In fact, Lina Khan during the Biden administration was using the rules that actually exist. It's just administrations ignoring those rules or not enforcing those rules. That was the problem. And the fact that Democrats put Lina Khan in that position, I think, is enough evidence to vote for Democrats for the foreseeable future, up and down the ballot. Yeah. All right. Real Benda says, if you could revamp the federal tax system, what would you do? Progressive tax structure where you get taxed more for every dollar that you make. So, you get taxed at 30% until you make $50,000. And then your 51,000th dollar gets taxed at a higher rate. So the $50,000 that you made it originally still gets taxed at 30%, but every dollar you make above that gets taxed at a higher rate. So it eventually, you get a guy who makes his billionth dollar, and then that gets taxed at 90%. Best champ ever says, keep your head up, brother. Don't let these clowns get to you. Fighting the good fight with you. I appreciate that. I actually did need a little love and support today. Just, I don't know why. These guys, they just happen to get me just the right way. Trouble says, what fraud were you referring to? You'll have to be more specific. Trouble. How are you still here? Yeah, prove me wrong is the last thing I remember saying to you. Trouble. Yeah. Which fraud are you referring to? Czar says, what do you think about the mileage tax? I don't know what the mileage tax is, Czar. Let me know. LeBron James says, some things did 9/11. U.S. is compromised by that seems like anti-Semitism, so I'm just going to go ahead and block that person. It says, you said fraud. I'm looking for specifics. What was I talking about when I said fraud? I'm wanting to look into it. Yeah, let me know. What was I talking about when I said fraud? Was there a specific politician that I was talking about? T-Vlog says, dude, you are one of the most legit streamers right now. Appreciate you having another cowboy. Thank you, T-Vlog. I appreciate that. Zara says, in California, they're trying to tax every mile that we drive. Every mile in a gas-powered vehicle? Trouble says, no, you were the one listing issues. Okay, so I'll tell you, there are people out there, billionaires, who have made all of their money through fraud by lying and cheating and stealing. And they have been taken to court and have lost their court cases and were ordered to pay restitution to all of the people that they frauded. And Donald Trump pardoned those billionaires in exchange for a little cashola in his crypto coin account. And now those billionaires no longer have to pay the American people the restitution that they deserve. There's one example of fraud for you, my guy. Polly Mullet says, you'd probably rat out Anne Frank, dude. What a weird thing to say, Polly. I'm going to give you an opportunity to not be like that in the future. Ide says, do you have a name I can find a search? Send me a DM and I will send it to you as soon as I can. Ide Trouble. Polly Mullet says, not you. Who then? Polly Mullet's the guy before. Oh, okay. Well, sure thing. No worries, Polly. We're all good in the hoods. Trouble says, what are your thoughts on the Minnesota frauds? There is more of that exact same kind of fraud happening in Texas. Trouble. I don't think any fraud is good fraud. And I think that the people who do the fraud should go to jail. But for some reason, everybody on the right keeps on talking about this Minnesota fraud as though Democrats are doing fraud, as though Democrats are enabling fraud, as though Minnesota is the only state that has fraud in it. So if you don't like fraud, you're really going to hate what's going on in Texas and Florida. Oh, ready. Scott Clower says, gave the Saudis our advanced AI chips for $500 million in crypto. Yeah, that is a bribe that the Trump administration took. Trouble says, also Ohio and Pennsylvania too. Yeah, I'm against all of that fraud. Oh, Trouble. Congratulations, you're back in my good graces. Richard Britta said, did Trump really shit himself? That's what it looks like. Foghorn Productions says, speaking of Texas, can we start calling him Ted Cruz? That's very funny. Yeah, Cancun Ted. Where did he go? Where did he go during the most recent storm? He went to like La Jolla or something, or some beach he ran away to instead of being there. Max Smith says, of course, Democrats, fraud, good, Republican, fraud, bad, great logic. Who said that, Max Schmidt? Who said that? Because I remember minutes ago saying that no fraud was good. So, seems like you might be full of shit, Max. Prove me wrong. Laguna Beach, thank you. Island 2 Mountain Girl, I appreciate you for that. Trouble says, well, Walz is a Democrat, so I can see the link. Yeah, but Walz didn't do that, And there's no dragging Ken Paxton, who's the governor of Texas, through the mud because the fraud is happening in his state. Why is it only Tim Walz? And you mentioned Ohio and Pennsylvania. Why aren't those governors being dragged for filth? Ready. Let's see here. Trouble says, we'll get to Texas. Oh, sure. Polly Mullet says his wheelchair would make that difficult. I am not going to make fun of people for their disabilities, but I will make fun of them for their shitty politics. Polly Mullets. We talked about this yesterday. We have to be the bigger people here. Trouble says those frauds are new on the radar. It's interesting that you would phrase it that way, Trouble, because the Minnesota frauds are old on the radar. Like, those cases have been settled. The white lady who perpetuated that fraud is sitting in jail right now. So why is it just in the news again? Could it be, Trouble, could it be that Trump and his acolytes saw an opportunity to demonize Democrats like Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar and Somali immigrants that are living in Minnesota? Do you think that that is possible? Eric Likes Cheese says, I'm not unable list bully. I'll pick on anybody who deserves it. I can't. I don't think it's right, but I also can't stop other people from doing it. Trouble says, no, they were on the lists. They were on the DL, but it's spreading because of the light on it. I don't know. I don't know, Trouble. I think that my version is more likely than your version. Mama Deb says, we need to stop looking for perfection in our candidates. Look at the current leadership. Agree. Alice says, do you think? Yes, I do, all the time. Israel Franco says, do we have to be bigger people instead of going after the Trump administration? I think that going after the Trump administration is not being petty. I think it's the law. I think you have to go after the people that break the law. And Trump broke the law, is currently breaking the law, is planning on breaking the law in the future. And so 100% we should go after him. I think there's a difference, though, between trying to throw Trump in jail because he broke a whole bunch of laws and making fun of Trump for being fat and ugly. Because there are perfectly nice people out there who are fat and ugly who are then going to hear that and go, oh, I guess the worst thing in the world is being fat and ugly. Same thing with Ken Paxton in Texas. You know, you can call him Governor Hot Wheels like Jasmine Crockett did, but that might hurt people's feelings who are in wheelchairs as well. And so I'm not going to do that myself, personally. Fog War Production says, is it just me or does Trump look and sound old now? I mean, he does, but I think, you know, he is still able to go out there and, you know, do his bullshit. And so I think that people let him get away with it. Let's see here. Kimberlina says, that's Governor Abbott, not Paxton. So sorry, everybody. My bad. I'm accidentally sounding like an idiot today. You know what? Yeah, I should probably dip because my brain is fried. The trolls got to me today, everybody. I apologize. I usually do better at this. But I really appreciate everybody being here. I really appreciate all the gifts and the likes and the shares and whatnot. It really does mean a lot to me that you guys are here and you allow me to do these live streams for you. I probably made some good points today, even if I was a little off my game. Ready. Jay Schaefer says, how is ICE getting funding? It was passed in the big, beautiful bill that was passed by Republicans and Donald Trump and signed into law by Donald Trump. So I would recommend not voting for Republicans in the future if you do not like the fact that ICE just had their budget tripled. All right, everybody. Let's see here. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling, but the mechanisms are there if you would like. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. If you are an Amazon Prime member, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free, and that helps me out a ton. Excuse me. Ugh, I'm a fucking animal today. Ugh, I'm disgusting. Let's see here. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month as well. If there are any questions that you want to ask me when the live stream is not happening, my DMs are open. You can email me through my website. You can hit me up via my Discord. Do not be shy about getting in touch. I want you guys to get in touch with me. I want to be a resource for you to be more informed and more involved in politics. And if I can do that for you, however I can do that for you, I want to do that for you. So use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. I love the Discord because there's great recommendations there also for... hold on a second. John Abbott said, I prefer Fled to Cruz, and love that. Yeah, there's great recommendations on the Discord for nonprofit organizations that desperately need your time and money. There are great recommendations for books and podcasts that you should 100% check out. I just finished reading Injustice, which is about the Justice Department during the first Trump administration up to today. And that book is excellent. I haven't updated the Discord recommendations list yet, but that book is 100% going on there. Special thanks to all of my regular subscribers and patrons. Grimicus, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, Patrick, Dan Blackroyd, the two Seans, and Lauren. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea for you all to do the work, because we only get out of this if we all do the work. All right, Calm Critic says, what do you think about all the fraud that is being uncovered? I'm against all fraud, whether it is Republicans or Democrats that are doing it. It is not Democrats doing fraud in Democratic states, though. So I want to just make sure that I'm being clear about that. Let's see here. I Trouble says, did they triple ICE funds? Yes, the big beautiful bill tripled ICE's budget, and now they have a larger budget than the Israeli military. Okay. Calm Critic says, are you sure about that? What do you mean, am I sure about that? Am I sure that the Democrats in Minnesota are not doing the fraud in Minnesota? Yes, I am sure about that. Calm Critic. What exactly are you getting at, Calm Critic? Do you believe that Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar are responsible for the fraud in Minnesota? Theo 10 says, God bless the USA, the only leader of the free world. I believe that protesters in Minnesota would argue that that is true. Ida Trouble says, absolutely they are responsible. Gotcha. I understand. I understand who you are. I'd trouble. I understand who you are, calm critic. The Democrats in Minnesota are not responsible for the fraud that happened in Minnesota. They were not complicit in it, and they were not naive to it. They did what they were supposed to do, and the people who did the fraud are now in jail. The only reason why this is in the news right now is because Republican politicians, Donald Trump and his people, are trying to demonize Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, and Somali immigrants, full stop. I Trouble says, then how is there fraud still going on? I don't know if there is fraud still going on. I Trouble. If there is, send those people to jail. Awesome Sauce says, if you really cared about fraud, you've been outraged about Trump pardoning George Santos. How interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it really seems I Trouble and calm critic that there's only one kind of fraud that you care about, and that is fraud that is happening in Democratic states. I find that really weird. I find it really weird that you guys are laser focused on fraud in Minnesota exclusively. I find that very sus. I find that very strange. I Trouble says the daycares and home health companies are empty. So I know you're probably referencing those Nick Shirley videos, I Trouble, and those have been debunked and disproven time and time again. So those are not real things that you are seeing. That is fake shit that is happening. Calm Critic says that's where it's happening. What about Texas and Florida? Calm Critic. Do you believe that there's no fraud happening in Texas and Florida? Sincere question, Calm Critic. I Trouble says debunked by who? By the news. Do you want me to send you information? Do you only believe right-wing sources? I Trouble. If I sent you The Guardian, or if I sent you the Associated Press, if I sent you the New York Times, would you say, oh, this is just fake news? And you're going to believe Nick Shirley instead. SCL says, what are your political views? I'm a progressive Democrat. SCL says, what's your opinion on abortion? I am pro-choice, but even if you are pro-life, you should still vote for Democrats because Democratic policies actually decrease the number of abortions that happen in the country. Republican policies don't eliminate abortion. They don't even decrease the number of abortions that happen. They only make pregnancy more dangerous for women. I Trouble says, send whatever. I'd look at it. No, I believe the guy who had the payouts for children that don't exist. Is that Nick Shirley that you're referring to? Calm Critic says, fraud is rampant with government officials. That's why small government is logical. I mean, there's more fraud depending on who is in charge, Calm Critic, and there's more fraud when Republicans are in charge than Democrats. So take that for however you feel. Sophia says, do you think there should be more or less restrictions on PACs and lobbying? More restrictions, full stop. Easiest question I've answered so far today, Sophia. Thank you for that. I really needed an easy one today because these guys are really getting my goats. All right, I got to get out of here. There's a fly in my room that's driving me bananas. All right, Calm Critic. All right, I Trouble. Send me a DM. If you want this information, send me a DM. But again, y'all are sus as hell, so I don't really believe that you guys care. All right, take it easy, everybody. Be good to each other. Be good to yourself. Self-care is part of the work, and I'll see you tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. You're not bombing me, Calm Critic. I just wish that you cared about getting accurate information and not spreading lies. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.